Thank you again for being here. I'm just making sure that you are not seeing the other screen, so just the presentation, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that. Again, technical difficulties. So thank you so much for being here. We are so honored and happy to have you. And thank you so much, Una, for this presentation that you have prepared for us. As you know, we are the Campus Association for Baha'i Studies at the University of Toronto. And we are very happy to have this presentation for you. So before we start, we know that we all know about the Zoom. We've been using it for the past few months. As unreal as it is, it has been almost 10, 11 months. But just a few reminders. We know that on the left corner, on the left bottom corner, you can see the buttons for unmuting and sharing your video. And after that, if you click on the participants, on the right-hand corner, you would see a button called Raise Hand. So if we can utilize that button for the discussion, because there are a lot of us in the call, so we would know who would like to contribute to the discussion, that would be amazing. With that, I would like to open the session with land acknowledgement. This is just an expression of gratitude and appreciation for those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on the land for thousands of years. This land acknowledgement is specifically for the land that the University of Toronto operates on, but I would like to invite you to also reflect on the land that you are residing and think about the people who have been there and the history for the thousands of years that has been there. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home for many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. With that, we would like to continue the session with a tablet from Abdul Baha. And this tablet is a tablet to the first African American Baha'i, and Andrea is going to read that for us.
O thou who art pure in heart, sanctified in spirit, peerless in character, beauteous in face, thy photograph hath been received, revealing thy physical frame in the utmost grace and the best appearance. Thou art dark in countenance and bright in character. Thou art like unto the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet it is the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world. I have not forgotten, nor will I forget thee. I beseech God that he may graciously make thee the sign of his bounty amidst mankind. Illumine thy face with the light of such blessings as are vouchsafed by the merciful Lord. Single thee out for his love in this age, which is distinguished among all the past ages and centuries.
Thank you so much, Andrea. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Rod to talk about CABS and our activities.
Hello, everyone. It is nice to see all your lovely faces. Do you hear me okay? I just want to check.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. I would like to give a special welcome to the students and faculty from the Nancy Campbell School. And I'm going to be starting us off with some opening remarks before we begin the talk. So this event is being hosted by the Campus Association for Baha'i Studies at the University of Toronto, downtown St. George campus. We are a student club at the University of Toronto, which gathers regularly to pray, socialize, and discuss the central principles of the Baha'i faith and their applications to our studies, our individual lives, our communities, and the world. Some of the concepts we discuss include the unity of religion, racial unity, the equality of men and women, and the harmony of science and religion as two complementary systems of knowledge. CABS is consisted of mostly post-secondary students, but invites everyone, regardless of education, age, religion, race, class, or sex, to participate in our events and our ongoing conversations. And if you are interested, you could contact us at our email at cabs@utoronto.ca, which should be there on the slide right in front of you. So it is my honor to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Una Vakhrassan. Una has kindly accepted to share her presentation titled The Pursuit of Freedom. She will be sharing with us her experience, learning, and wealth of knowledge on the central theme of racial unity. We have decided to invite Una to come and speak after a series of conversations on racial unity in CABS that we had over the summer. The harmful effects of racial prejudice, as you are well familiar, can be traced back through the history of our nations and continues to hinder the growth of our most vulnerable populations in the present day. Racism, the universal house of justice, the central governing body of the Baha'i faith, states, start quote, is a profound deviation from the standard of true morality. It deprives a portion of humanity of the opportunity to cultivate and express the full range of their capability and to live a meaningful and flourishing life, while blighting the progress of the rest of humankind, end quote. With regards to race and color, Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, says that, start quote, Baha'u'llah has proclaimed the oneness of the world of humanity. He has caused various nations and divergent creeds to unite. He has declared that difference of race and color is like the variegated beauty of flowers in a garden. If you enter a garden, you will see yellow, white, blue, red flowers in profusion and beauty, each radiant within itself, and although different from the others, lending its own charm to them. Racial difference in the human kingdom is similar. If all the flowers in the garden were of the same color, the effect would be monotonous and wearying to the eye. Therefore, Baha'u'llah hath said that the various races of humankind lend a composite harmony and beauty of color to the whole. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side, without discord or disagreement between them. And without further ado, please help me in welcoming Una to begin. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's really lovely to be here and see your smiling faces, those of you that I can see. Zoom tells me that there are about 3 screens of people at the moment, so I can't see all of your faces, but I can see those on my first screen, and it is really lovely to see. I'm very grateful for CABS for asking me to come and speak about this. And then I feel I am in no way in an expert position to be able to do so. I am learning. And I think that the reason why all of you are here as well is that we are all learning and we need to learn together. I think that's the way that we we combat this. So this journey to learning more about the oneness of mankind and the division of racism led me to take a course. And I took this course, well, there was a book and a course. It was called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing was the name of the book. And I happened upon it because of some presentations that I had seen that were done by the author, Dr. Joy DeGruy. And she had done these conversations, I think really to largely a Baha'i audience. But she is a lecturer. This is her life's work, and she takes this all over the world. And it was really intriguing to me. It wasn't the start of my learning about this, because I do come from an island that remains a colony to this day. As much as we like to call ourselves a dependent territory. But that's just nice speak for, we remain under the auspices of the United Kingdom. And with that comes its challenges. Its challenges in terms of interaction between peoples, interaction with one another among the same group of people. And it's, as I read the book, in the beginning of the book, Joyce sort of sets what it was that drew her to look into this subject in particular in more detail. Not to mention that there is, lots of different activities that can be classified as racism. But what led her to it was certain behaviors that she observed as she was growing up. And there would be things like, she would talk about anger among people, like it was always at the surface, it seemed always there. There were ways that they talked to one another that weren't particularly kind and loving, even though they were of the same family or of the same race, and everybody's just struggling and trying to survive. And I thought, you know what? I've encountered those things too. I've noticed those things in my own community. So it was really interesting to jump into it and see or understand a little bit more. And I think essentially, I wasn't taught my history in terms of Black people in Bermuda. And I, not having lived on the North American continent, close to it, visited often, but not having lived on it and not having had an education in that respect, there was a lot missing. And having grown up in England as well, it's a different narrative. And it's interesting to look at it all and to see it all, I guess, with a view of we're all moving through this. And I think one of the conclusions I came to kind of early on was that none of us is immune. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, and what your background may be. We are all affected by this. And I think that's one of the things of what I have learned, at least from this COVID pandemic. The whole world has been affected. I think we've turned a blind eye to how racism infiltrates the very structures and frameworks of society, how we engage with it, no matter what color we are, I believe. We engage with it and perpetuate it, that we need to actually learn about it and understand how it is we can disengage from fueling it. And I think that's part of what my learning has been up to now, and it's ongoing. And I think as we go along in the presentation, and I have prepared a few slides to go through, and it will hopefully prompt and focus me a little bit more as we go on. But I think that's what prompted me to be able to do this and to accept to share. And this is not, I just want to preface this before I jump into it. This is not like a critique of Dr. Joy's work in any way. I'm not giving you a synopsis or overview of the book, but it is more those parts of it, I think, that stood out for me and that I have time to go into a little bit. I also want to add that this is a conversation. As much as we can make it a conversation, I know it's a little difficult on Zoom, and we are a lot of people, but I think I would love for you to be able to share your thoughts, your questions in the chat. I'm ably assisted by my friend Barbara, who will, stop me and say, so-and-so has a question or whatever. So please feel free, if you need to use the raise hand function, and we will try to get to you, because we want this to be a conversation about this topic. These conversations started with COVID and the Black Lives Matters marches. And I think I see my responsibility being part of keeping that conversation going. And I think that's the impetus for me sharing this. So I am going to move now to my slide presentation. Bear with me. Just needs to load up, sorry. Here we go. Can everybody see that? Is that okay? Great.
Yes.
Lovely. I will take it down periodically so that we can see each other, but it's just to help me move on through this conversation. And again, let me thank you all for being here, and thank CABS for inviting me as well. And Andrea for having the conversation and thinking that this would be a good idea. I want to start with this quote by Langston Hughes. And this is from his poem Harlem, which is the last stanza of the poem. And I thought was a very moving sentence. So here we stand on the edge of hell in Harlem and look out on the world and wonder what we're going to do in the face of what we remember. And I love this sentence because I think I spend a lot of time trying not to remember and not to think about it, because some of it's very painful. And part of engaging with, how society has been structured around racism, it precludes my involvement. At least that's what I feel and felt. And so I think as a result of what we're going to go into, and I'll go to the next slide. So essentially what Dr. Joy has done is she's come up and coined this phrase. And she's also set out the criteria that make it up, feeling that our behavior at the moment as Black people, descendants of slaves, African Americans, if you want to call them that, but they extend down to the islands in the Caribbean, extends down to South America as well, and all over sort of this side of the world. Slave ships were delivering slaves constantly. So even though our experiences, I feel, I would say from Bermuda may be very slightly different from what the experience is in America, it still has a thread of commonality through it. And I think it's these things that Dr. Joy is sort of drawing out and drawing our attention to. And so, essentially, post-traumatic slave syndrome is the effect of history on our culture and our soul. And these are the broad, sweeping, broad criteria that she raises in the book. One is the multi-generational trauma. And as we unpacked this particular aspect of it during the course, we were able to see, and as we know, as we're learning more and more about trauma and how it passes on from person to person. And we know this from the Holocaust experience. We know this from Vietnam vets. We know this from other veterans of war, that these experiences that they have, for some people, not for everybody, for some people, have a lasting effect on their person, their body, in essence. And that can get passed on to the next generation. And they're discovering this, and there's a whole epigenetics section in science that is looking into this. But more and more it's coming to light that this is the case. So she thought about this and said, okay, if we look at the manner in which the slaves were treated as they made land by those that owned them, and the manner in which American chattel slavery was constructed and made into an economy, to build a nation, that has had lasting effects on everybody concerned. But she specifically looked at the effect it has had on the African American population. And we can look at slavery and then the end of slavery, or at least the legislative end of slavery, and the ensuing lynchings that happened and the Jim Crow, cumulative laws that were imposed and segregation and everything that led after that, and still what exists to this day. This was just a very wide and huge body of information that she was able to pull together and then piece together the effects that it had on people, the lasting effects it had on people and continues to have on people. So we also talk about continued oppression, which I was just talking about, but also a real or imagined lack of access to benefits available in society. And by that, I understood that the fact that society is constructed for a few, but yet we're all partaking in it. We all have to live in this world. We are all here together in this land. And instead of, I think, constructing a way in which we can share it, instead we've compartmentalized it so that a few can benefit from the growth and the progress that is being made. Others try hard to, and some do, but others are exclusively excluded. So let me move on. So one of the items that she noticed that perpetuates this is this idea of dehumanization. So making out that the slaves, when they came, were different, were othered, were less than human. And she looked at a few of the ways in which, well, a few, I've got several there, ways in which this was done. So one, the theories in science. And I found this really fascinating because people that called themselves scientists were actually using criteria that had no basis in science at all. So then it makes you wonder, well, how could this be? You were being told that slaves were different because, and this was termed and couched as scientific. So one of the most learned of people back then was, Thomas Jefferson. He was considered an eminent personage of his time. And what did he say about Black people? His very words: they smelled bad and were physically unattractive, required less sleep, were dumb, cowardly, and incapable of feeling grief. So here you have eminent forefather of, one of the framers of the Constitution, talking about a segment of society in this way. Of course it must be true. Why, we wouldn't believe people who are educated. They must say something that is true. But so this is how it began. This is how people were encouraged to look at the slaves as less than human. The picture, unfortunately, it's not a very happy one. The picture that I've got on this page is a picture of a lynching. As hard as it is to look at, please do have a look at it and have a note for yourself how it is the people are dressed in that photograph. And if we look at the expressions on their faces, this is essentially you're coming to the death of somebody. He's hanging there from the tree, dying. But look how people are dressed. People only got dressed like this to go to church. So this would have been a Sunday. We've left church and we're gonna go see a lynching, and it's gleeful. This was the type of attitude around the treatment of slaves. And how do we have these pictures? We would ask ourselves, why are they still around? Well, these pictures were postcards that people wrote sentiments on and sent to one another as greetings. This was something to celebrate. And there were other souvenirs that they took from lynchings as well. But this was a part of having people view Black people in and from a certain context. And it grew and it grew. So we look at the development of anti-Blackness and white supremacy. That was something that was cultivated over time, cultivated specifically, one, to create obviously superiority and inferiority between the races and division, but also to ensure that the economy was perpetuated. You had the objectification of Black women. And this was something I hadn't appreciated back in that time, but from learning about it and facing it was hard to look at and hard to view and take in. But one of the ways I think that Dr. Joy describes when she visited Africa, and she visited the slave castles, and some of them are on the coast in Ghana. She learned by taking a tour there that the slaves would be stolen or taken from their villages. Who knows how far away from where these castles were on the coast, and then shackled and marched to where the slave castles were. And obviously it was a very difficult journey. So there were people that died along the way. But when they arrived, they would divide the groups into men and women. And then, as if to enforce superiority, all of the women in the square, and this was described to Dr. Joy, would be raped in front of the men. So one, you have this exercise of power over the women, but you have an emasculation of the men to understand and to appreciate that this is our world now, and you need to toe the line. And it's hard to talk about and understand, but this is the reality, I think, of the brutality of slavery. So we move on to the 3/5 compromise, and I believe it's the next slide that I have. Yes. It was interesting because I was sharing with my husband that I had learned about the importance of the Electoral College. I never really appreciated that in the US elections. And I didn't understand the link that it had to slavery either. But it was clear this was a decision that was reached during a convention where the Constitution was discussed in Philadelphia in 1787, where the founding fathers, some being from the North, some being from the South, were trying to decide on representation and taxation. So the situation was that the North was growing. The North had more landowners per capita, and the South had fewer landowners, but more people if you included the slaves. And so they were taxed on the amount of people that were in a state. And the Electoral College came into being because they didn't feel that the popular vote would be sufficient enough to decide a president. So they said, no, we need to also have the Electoral College to help us make this decision. And we see the controversy that has come up as a result of it over the last couple of elections. So they reached a compromise, both sides, because obviously the North was saying, well, you don't consider your slaves to be human, so you can't count them as one human person. It's like, no, we couldn't do that. The South couldn't do that. So they came to a compromise that a slave would be 3/5 of a person, more than half, but less than whole. So in that way, the southern states would have an advantage when it came to representation in the Electoral College, because more votes you got, the larger the state it was. And for taxation purposes, this suited the Northerners because at least the slaves were being counted to some extent, and thus taxation would be more. And at that time, my understanding is the bulk of the wealth of the nation was coming from the South. So I believe my next slide, and we're still on the topic of dehumanization, and I probably should stop because I can't see my chat at the moment, but Barbara, if there's any question or...
Yeah, we have no questions at this point, but if maybe we invite people for questions and you just carry on.
Okay, well, if anyone wants to raise their hand, if you can let me know because I can't see them. So another one of the ways in which dehumanization is affected is this way of comparing Black men in particular to apes, to animals. And it's interesting to see that there is a story of a young Congolese man, and he was from a tribe that was short in stature and therefore called pygmies. And they had placed him in the New York Zoo with the apes. And just the degradation that he suffered as people came in to see him and paid to come and see him and feed him. Eventually he was released, and he committed suicide afterwards. And it's a heart-wrenching story, but you know, it's sad to think of placing a person in a zoo, but New York wasn't the only place, because there you can find on the internet that there's a picture of a young girl in Belgium in a zoo where she is walking and people are feeding her, offering her food. And she couldn't be more than 4 or 5. And it's sad to see that. But the photographs that I'm going to show you are of modern times, and probably some of you have seen them before, but those of you that may not, consider yourselves educated. So we have this LeBron James, favorite of one of my sons, who's into basketball. This is a historic cover, really, because it's the first ever Black man to be on the cover of Vogue. And how did they stage it? They staged it as if he was an ape. And so you have the contrasting photograph there. And Dr. Joy would describe like even the white-toed shoes, and they had him open his mouth. And there was a lot of controversy around this photograph. I think this is from 2007, I believe. The photograph next to them is an H&M advert. The coolest monkey in the jungle. This is 2018. And there was uproar as why it is you need to call and have labeled a Black boy as a monkey. And by contrast, the white boy as a survival expert. So still, there remains, we are learning, things are getting better, but still there remains this, I don't know if we call it a blind spot, but definitely something that we're not seeing in terms of how we are projecting our boys and our men to society. Oftentimes, you know, if you look at Michelle Alexander's book on mass incarceration, it is very, very upsetting to see how the powers that be orchestrated the state that the prisons are in now. And I don't think that is just in the US. That exists in Bermuda as well. And I was a prosecutor during those times, and that was what we were tasked to do, where those Black men trying to eke out a living, I think, and probably falling foul of the law for what now would be considered minimum amounts of drug paraphernalia, were given excessively long terms of imprisonment. And now that we're looking at that and seeing that we were just feeding into a narrative that had been created to perpetuate a specific result. And it ruined communities and continues to affect communities as a result. So this is a case where the definition of Black people was considered. Dred Scott Cable was a slave who traveled around with his owners. They left one state where slavery was enforced. They moved for some time to another state where slaves had been emancipated and were free, and he was enjoying the freedom in that state. And then he was required to move back with his slave owners. And he did not agree with this and decided to take this to court and have his matter heard and aired and made to understand that if he'd lived somewhere where slavery had been abolished and was not practiced, surely he had the right to continue to enjoy his freedom and not to be re-enslaved. And the court held, I just have to change my screen so that I can read it. This is in 1857. The court ruled that Black people are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. It's interesting because when they were celebrating, I can't remember, but they were celebrating the Constitution, and Thurgood Marshall, who was a Supreme Court justice, gave an iconic speech. And essentially he said that the framers didn't understand the magnitude of what it was they were putting in place. The language was inclusive, but the intention behind the language was selective. And he said that we the people, which is how the Constitution begins, did not extend to the slaves, Black people at that time. It was only for a select few. Yet they used that language, and now they have an opportunity to live up to the unity and the oneness that that phrase evokes. And he kind of threw down the gauntlet as a challenge to the nation to be able to actually walk their talk. One of the other stories that I find really interesting and moving is a story that Dr. Joy tells about her experience with the Statue of Liberty. And this was something that was a real eye-opener to me. And some of you may know this story and some of you may not, so I apologize if you've heard it before. But she always prefaces it with the audience. What is Lady Liberty holding in her left hand? And people are like, oh, I don't know, I'm not too sure, but it's something. Well, she had been to France to see the original prototype for the statue, because it is essentially a gift from France. And come to find out that Lady Liberty was holding broken chains. in her left hand. That was how the original sculptor had intended it to be, because it was a symbolism of the end of slavery, hence the broken chains. And held high in her left hand, not as high as the torch in her right, you know, a representation of freedom and moving on, but also, but there nonetheless invisible. But if you look at Lady Liberty today, there are no chains there. And Dr. Joy knew this story because she had heard it from somebody, but this was not the story that the Rangers gave you when you visited Ellis Island. And she was encouraged by a relative of hers back in like 2007 or so to come and visit because he had got this job as a ranger at Ellis Island. She said, I don't want to come there, I'm going to cause some trouble, you know, because I'm going to ask questions and I can't be quiet. And she had never visited for that very reason. But he encouraged her and he said, no, you need to come. So she went and she visited. And the ranger that was taking her group around, she asked the question, so what is she holding in her left hand? And he's like, oh no, there's nothing in her left hand. There's nothing there. And he did not speak about at all the chains. And there was an old visitor center in Ellis Island at the time. They've built a new one since. And she went into the visitor center and she found in the basement in the visitor center, right at the back of other paraphernalia, a small replica of the original that the sculptor had intended for the statue to look like, with the chains in her left hand. And, you know, she said it was there. It was there. You would really have to hunt to find it, but it was there. But the story wasn't being told. And she prefaces this with hidden in plain sight. Where are the chains? Well, the chains are at her feet. They are in the statue. They are there. But nobody is told that they're there. Nobody knows that they are there. But she knew they were there. Because that was the compromise that the Americans had made with the French, as the French insisted that the chains needed to be a part of the statue. And so they are now at her feet. But the Rangers weren't drawing attention to this. History books in schools did not indicate that this was even the case. You know, the Statue of Liberty was, you know, an icon for the immigrants, not for slavery, not for the emancipation of slavery. Well, Dr. Joy, in her inimitable way, went around the world telling this story. And eventually she gets a call from the Ministry of the Interior. And they're responsible for, you know, national parks and things around America. And they ask her to come and train the Rangers about the history and the significance of the chains in this statue. And so in 2019, in the Washington Post, as they are announcing this new and improved and visitor center that they have built, now with photographs showing the chains prominently and having exhibits around the importance of the chains as a part of the statue. And it was reported in the Post. Lady Liberty was originally designed to celebrate the end of slavery, not the arrival of immigrants. Ellis Island, the inspection station through which millions of immigrants passed, didn't open until 6 years after the statue was unveiled in 1886. The plaque with the famous Emma Lazarus poem, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to break free," wasn't added until 1903. And the question Dr. Joy quite provocatively asks her audience was, but someone knew and decided not to tell the truth about it, didn't want it to come out, didn't think it was worth letting people know, letting the children of slaves understand that that statue, that it's a symbol of freedom around the world, was actually for them and represents their resilience, their strength, and the fact that they exist today. How different would be perhaps their view of their own history, their involvement in their communities. These are things that our children need to know. These are things about their history that changes the narrative and helps people to understand that, yes, we played a part. Yes, our forefathers were slaves, but they are a part of and have paved the way for what it is we enjoy today. We don't get to look back and say, we're ashamed of that. That is our past. We cannot erase it, though we try. A lot of us do, because we want to distance ourselves from it. It's something that was bad. But to have this prominently now displayed is something to celebrate. Okay, so that's my end of dehumanization. And these are the two aspects of the book that I'd actually taken out to look at dehumanization in particular, and healing as well. I selected healing, I think, because that is the trajectory that we all are on. And that was the reason why Dr. Joy had written the book in the first place, because it is, once we know that these things were in place and how they came to be, we can go about the work of trying to recover from it all and not continuing to reel from the oppression and re-traumatizing ourselves from it. And she looks at the ways in which it is us as communities can recover. There's a lot that has been done systematically, and I'm leaving out a chunk of stuff in terms of how communities have been fragmented, how thoughts have been perpetuated and essentially lies to make us believe that we are less than. But also part of this is the requirement of us as Black people, us as people of the world, to understand, Black, white, whatever we are, to understand the origins of this, and then to be able to get onto the work of healing, because that's the process. I mean, we can look back and say, oh, it's hard. And I can say from my own experience that I'm not one of those people who enjoys watching films about slavery. They're very, very distressing, and I can't sleep for a long time after seeing them. And so I stayed away from them, essentially, because I guess that is the re-traumatizing effect. And that is not everybody's experience. I do remember as a child, when the miniseries Roots was on. There's not a lot I remember from that, because I don't think I was old enough to be able to grasp all of the context about it. But the brutality was evident. The suffering was evident. And as such, I found it, I still find it, I have to force myself, but I still find it very difficult to see films. But I'm also learning that many of these films have been adapted from books that have been written, like 12 Years a Slave and stuff. And unfortunately, the book is worse than the movie. So it's actually a respite to go and watch the movie, as gruesome as it can be. But now we're turning to the work of healing, and we're moving on. And we're looking at these aspects of how it is a community heals. I mean, not just the Black community, all of us need to heal. And if any of you is interested or would like to learn about this, there's a wonderful book entitled My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. And he cites Dr. Joy's research that she has done in compiling post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Can you repeat the title, please?
My Grandmother's Hands. And it is a book about how trauma moves through our bodies. And he has a wonderful lens through which he's viewing the effects of racism on people. He looks at law enforcement, calling them blue bodies, white bodies, and Black bodies. And he says where we feel trauma first is in our bodies. And as I was listening to this book, because I got it as an audiobook, as I listened to it, it was really interesting to hear the development of his thought process. And it really rang true. But essentially, his book is on healing. We need to understand that trauma is moving through us in these ways. We can think about it as sometimes we react in our bodies before we even really compute what is going on in our heads. The case in point that he uses and really brought it visually to me, he says, you know, if you put your hand on a hot stove, unintentionally, you don't even, realize that you're doing it, your hand reacts first, and then you think, wow, that was hot. The thought comes afterwards, the reaction first. And he's addressing a lot of these deaths that have happened in the US by law enforcement on Black bodies in particular, and looking at the way history has formed those sequence of events. And I definitely recommend it to you. It's a very interesting and innovative way of looking at this work. So moving on to positive racial socialization. What we had spoken about before was racist socialization, the looking at Black people as inferior. A lot of perhaps what the media industry perpetuates is the white body as what is superior, what is the ideal. So the question then is, well, what happens then to those who are not white? How do they react to this effect? And I'm going to just stop sharing this screen at a moment because I just have a short clip that I want to share with you, but I'll preface it just first. This is a clip from, there was an experiment done in the 70s by a doctor, I think he is a researcher, and he had taken young children, so 4 or 5 years old, and he put a Black doll and a white doll before them to ascertain their preference. Now, this is a well-documented study. So this experiment was replicated by a 16-year-old in a project, I think in 2008. And she has made a video of the modern version of this experiment. And essentially the findings are the same. But I will just show this short clip for you. 1 second. I need to just disengage from that. Sorry, bear with me. Sorry, that was wrong. Okay, here it is. I apologize. That was just a lovely interlude.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with black children. He asked them to choose between a black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with?
This one. I like that one. I can. This one.
That one?
This one. I like to play with this.
And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
She's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And can you and why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And why do you think that's a nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you? "15 out of the 21 children preferred the white doll."
Yes. So that was the experiment. And, you know, the question is, where would they be getting their information? I mean, they're watching television like everybody else. They're seeing billboards like anybody else, but they're young children watch television and cartoons as I did when I was growing up. But I have to be honest that if you put me at that age before that experiment, that would have been the same outcome for me. And I remember having the conversation with my mother and looking at, you know, how everything was set up to believe that. The cartoons you watched, the dolls I had to play with, their hair, but even conversations in my extended family about the darkness of my skin, the width of my nose, the kinkiness of my hair. You know, all of this was, you know, criteria that I couldn't really change, criteria that was deemed to be not acceptable. And we take that on as children. It's very clear, you know. So you grow up understanding that you're the other. I was also having a conversation, I think, with my son the other day, and saying, even look at the fairy tales and the books that children read. And I was thinking, okay, what was one of my favorites then? The Ugly Duckling. And what was the premise of the Ugly Duckling? That whilst it was a signet and black, it was ugly. But then it metamorphosized into this wonderful swan. And then it was all of a sudden adored and loved and beautiful. But it's the underlying symbolism that you unconsciously engender as a result of that, right? You know, and I don't think it's done, and maybe it is done intentionally, I don't know, but it definitely, you come away with, as a child, black is bad, white is good, you know, and I know for myself that I constructed a framework around this. So you end up deeming as bad the Black side of you. I was trying to explain this to my friends who I was have been talking to lately as I'm trying to put my thoughts together for this talk. And it was like trying to outrun your skin, trying to be something or fit yourself into a glass that you just didn't fit into. You know, but you knew that the closer you could be to that, perhaps you might be invited to join the outer echelons of the inner circle, you know? But that too is it leaves you in a very sad place, definitely. And it's just not the way to be. It's how do we, now that I'm a parent, realize that I have to celebrate the color of my skin, the texture of my hair, and that there is beauty in it. Even though I might not hear that in the wider society and community, and that we have to be more intentional in the way that we are raising our children these days. Dr. Joy talks about, you know, really intentionally conditioning our children to understand and appreciate and value the color of their skin and the different shades that there are, and trying to root out from the Black community in and of itself, looking at each other in terms of the spectrum. So i.e. the closer you are to the fairer you are, the better you are, basically. The darker you are, you know, the more despised you are. And we do this in our community. And, you know, it's fragmented within itself. There are theorists who don't frame that as racism, but there are those that do. You know, I'm not too sure where I fall at the moment, but it is definitely a form of colorism, you know, and every society has it. But this is what we need to root out to, because, you know, there is enough grief out there already. We don't have to compound it. I have the story of when Black Panther came out. And my boys are into Marvel, and I don't know if it's Marvel or the other one or whatever. They're very into all of those things. And they had gone to see it, and I hadn't gone to see it, but it was like a month later, and it was still at the cinema in Bermuda. And so a friend and I went together because I was actually told to go and see it. And it was a white friend had said to me, "No, Una, this movie breaks barriers. You need to see it." And I was like, what is he talking about? This is an action movie, you know? But I went to see it. and there, I am not really into superheroes and all that kind of stuff, but there is a feeling. You just know when you get that feeling, when you see positive expressions of who you are portrayed on the big screen. And not, I mean, it's not that we haven't seen movies with Black people in it, but Black superheroes, people that, you know, are celebrating the darkness of their skin, making fun of, you know, what we do to our hair. And don't get me started, because that's a whole nother talk, you know, but that, you know, just to celebrate who we are and what we are. I had to go and see it again because it was a great experience just seeing it. And I didn't know that we would be able to see something like that. We've seen all the films about slavery, about, you know, our leaders that have lived before and led the Black community in civil rights and things like this. And those have been very inspiring. But this is just pure, unadulterated mainstream commercialism with a Black flair, you know? And that was really something great. And this was the positive, I think when we're talking about positive racial socialization, it's things like this, you know, that give us that feel good feeling of, yes, I am who I am, and I can be proud of it. Dr. Joy talks about us having to now intentionally condition our children. So we need to be more specific in what it is we teach them. We teach them, yes, that they're beautiful, yes, that their hair is lovely, but we also have to go that extra step. And that is, when you go out into the world, you are going to hear lies. You are going to hear that you are not beautiful, that you are dumb, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And you need to understand that that is not true. So it's not that we just build them up, but we also have to prepare them for what they're going to face. And when they are prepared in that way, you know, then there's a different sort of reasoning that goes on in our heads when we're encountered with those obstacles. Because I can think of, you know, when I encountered the obstacles, it was like, well, okay, you can't do this. Well, that's the end of that then. You know, we're not even put up a fight. It's that kind of, Dr. Joy talks about vacant esteem. Like you just don't, you don't even have low esteem. You just have none at all. And an appreciation for who you are as a person and to be able to achieve something. I was part of a conversation recently, a gathering, and one of the ladies was sharing how she had entered into a doctoral program in, I think in New York somewhere, I can't remember exactly the state. And it was in the sciences. And she had made her way into the program on the basis of merit. And I guess the dean or whoever the head of the college was at that time, pulled her in, and she sat before two white men who told her, thank you, Barbara, I'll just finish this story, who told her that, oh, we don't give doctorates to Black people. You know, and she went away, and what she did is she called both sides of her family. What she had the American side, she's half American and half Ghanaian. And she called the American side of her family, and they're like, okay, time to regroup, come back home, don't worry about it. We'll get on with this. Then she called the other side, because you got to call both sides and get, you know, the opinion, have consultation. And the Ghanaian side said, what do you mean? I mean, you know, don't they know that you are somebody? And what do they mean they don't give doctorates? They don't give doctorates, you earn them. And told her, inspired her, and encouraged her to go back and continue that program and work for it. So it's sometimes, as she told this story, she told it in the framework of obstacles. Sometimes obstacles that are before us are real and immovable. But sometimes those obstacles are just an opportunity for you to grow in strength and to grow in character. You know, how do you know the difference between the two is the question, but you know, this is the test, to be able to stand firm and move through. And this is what we need to share with our children. You know, the first rejection or what have you is something you can move through, over, under, around, or what have you, because you are you. And Barbara says we have questions, and I'm going to be quiet now.
Are you ready for questions? We have text questions. We have a live question.
Oh, let's go, please.
There are comments. So we're going to go to the live question first. Sebastian.
Hello.
Hi, Una.
Hi.
Yes, I'm really happy to to hear you this presentation. And I know I am very interested in all these topics because it's part of what I am and it's part of our history. So it is very important to get educated, and I want to congratulate you for all this. It is part of a process of healing. I just wanted to ask you a question. If we have to compare the old society, I don't know how to put it, right?
Mhm.
But if we have to compare like the old Western society, okay, in times of slavery, and this new Western society, regarding how Black people were treated
Mhm.
and how they are being treated
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
what will you say? Is there some progress or anything? How will you compare this? Then after your answer, I will just add some comment too.
Every day, Sebastian, we are progressing. Every day. And I think it's important to look and appreciate and celebrate how far we've come. The freedoms that we enjoy today, yes, they are inhibited in some ways by just the manner in which society interacts because of the stain of racism that infiltrates our institutions. But we have come far. And I think there's one story in the book, I believe it was in the book, it may have been in the course, that Dr. Joy told us about when one of her sons was arrested, arrested by the police. Essentially, he had stepped off the curb, and so he'd taken him for jaywalking. And he was handcuffed and placed in the car, and he was upset and angry. And I don't know if you've ever seen Black men can get angry real quick. It's kind of scary. It's scary. And that I think is also, part of the trauma that they carry around, this frustration at constantly being stopped and questioned by the police, etc., just for being Black. But once she talked him down from his anger, when she talked him down from his anger, she reminded him, because he went on a tirade about, I don't understand, I just want to give up, why can't they just leave me alone, etc., etc. She said to him, remember that the slaves have come here and paved the way for you to enjoy what you do now. You don't get to give up, because there are generations coming after you for which you need to think about. So yes, we have come a long way, and we have a long way to go. And we have to be involved and engaged in the work that it takes. And it's hard, painful, gut-wrenching work, unfortunately. But we have to have the courage to do it.
Thank you. Thank you to that. You're totally right. And that is exactly what I've been thinking. That it's really painful. And unfortunately, many people sympathize, and maybe many of them understand what we went through and what we are still through. And I believe there is hope. And I think for me as a Black person who continuously, we are still suffering like all this trauma, as you said, it's felt in your body first before even getting into your mental, all this thing. I have come to realize that giving love, like paying with love, everything that was done to us is not only a way of healing, of like getting better, but it is proving wrong to those who thought that we were less than human. Okay, I study immigration, and in all this process, I also studied like the history of like slavery and everything. And of course, like Black people were treated as like merchandise. Okay, so we were not counted as like a human. So will you die, or it's like it doesn't change anything? It's like a food that gets spoiled and in the grocery store and thrown to the garbage. This is how our body was treated, how Black people were treated when they die. Okay, so I really congratulate you to that, and I encourage you to continue to inspire of the Black community, and also along with us, like all the white friends and other people, to celebrate humanity through love. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian. Una, then there's some comments and questions. So Sue says, to the extent that we aspire to spiritual degrees, even as we have aspired to material degrees, we will see the grievous errors we have made and we will swiftly correct them. That is, to some extent, the spiritual destiny America has been given.
Absolutely. I mean, when we started the program, Andrea had read, it was essentially a letter from Abdul Baha, who was the center of the covenant, the Baha'i faith, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith. And I love this story because Robert Turner was a slave. And his owners were Baha'i. So he had learned and heard about the Baha'i faith from them. And it was as if, it's not written anywhere, but this is my own interpretation of it. It was as if he was sending a photograph of himself to Abdul Baha to let him know, by the way, I'm Black, would I be accepted in this faith? And then Andrea read that beautiful letter, you know, so it's very humbling to understand and hear the encouragement and the love that Abdul Baha shared with him. And it's actually, I have a story that I'll tell a bit later after we have some more questions and comments. Sorry.
It's wonderful. This is Dean, who says, thank you, Una, for having the courage to share your inner reality and perceptions with this mostly white group of people. We are honored that you trust us to share with us what may be uncomfortable and painful, but we need to know pain heals.
It definitely does. And I'll tell you one of the things that I did. I am in a community of predominantly white people. And so if I want to get to know anybody, I have to join, you know, white spaces and show up in white spaces. And one of the spaces I recently joined was the Canadian Federation for University Women. And yeah, it's been wonderful. And some of my friends are here. So it's lovely to have their support here. But it's a way that I can learn. It's a way that I can extend the conversation and that we can all understand together. And I think that's what needs to happen. That is how we heal. That is how we learn.
This question is from Sue. Do you think it's healthy, considering their spiritual reality, for Black parents to give the talk to their children?
I feel I never got the talk. And I feel that if I did have the talk, I may have looked at things a little differently. But what I did get was an introduction and foundation in the Baha'i faith. And one of the things I had put out on the healing slide was faith. And what the slaves came over with, interesting fact, 20% of them were actually Muslim. That was really a revelation to me. But they had this sense of faith and a belief in something that nobody could take away from them. You could beat them, you could demean them, but there was still this light within them that they cultivated, and they cultivated by singing with one another, you know, by holding one another up. And I think that is also a key to the pieces of this healing framework, a very important piece.
Added to Sue's question is, what if parents create a better talk for their children, a talk aimed at their children's spiritualization rather than racialization? What would that be like?
I think that it includes it, because the talk that the children are giving is that you are noble, that you are deserving of love and respect, underlying everything that they need to talk about the color of their skin. So, you know, I'll tell you one aspect about it, and I understand this, and I have to preface it with an unrelated story. A friend said to me, she was having some problems at work. She had done something, and she had been found out. She tried to conceal it. She'd been found out, and then not everybody knew yet, but just like one person, and she was completely horrified. And she reached out to me. And I said to her, you need to get in front of the narrative. You need to control it. You need to come out and say, I did wrong, and be a leader to the people, and they will respect you for it. And I think the aspect of getting in front of the narrative, before it is you listen and hear and take in everything that society tells you, there needs to be this buffer first. I need to be able to say to my children, your hair is beautiful, and it's just the way it should be. Because when you get to college or wherever, and you're told that your hair looks like pubic hair and all of that, and you feel awful as a result of it, you will have that narrative of your parents to realize that within you, there is some strength. And that needs to be built up, I think, first at home by our mothers as the primary teachers.
Beverly says, today a University of Toronto female student of Somalian background was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship. She said her parents, refugees to Canada, sacrificed everything for her to believe there were no obstacles she could not overcome. Yeah, beautiful.
Very much so. That's wonderful.
Linda says, how much of this demonizing of peoples based on color and gender began with misappropriation of concepts of using darkness and then black to represent evil and bad, while white is used to represent holy and good. And then feminine as spiritual and masculine as material, splitting basic humanness into these types of categories. And unfortunately, many leaders and writers still propagating these as truths rather than literary devices.
I don't really know how to answer that. But who knows where it stems from? I think it stems from human nature. The essence of us needing to compete. And me, I don't know even if that was, something that is manufactured by society itself, because it's definitely fueled and perpetuated in society that we need to compete against each other. There has to be a good and a bad, a right and a wrong, someone who's successful and someone who is not.
There's been someone with a raised hand for a while, and I
Yes.
put a chat out, so I'm just going to ask to unmute. They didn't respond to me, and so if you have a question, go ahead. That's Sayed.
Maybe we'll come back to them.
Yeah, perhaps. So other than that, Una, there's lots of wonderful comments that you should read up here that I don't think I need to necessarily read out loud.
I will save the chat. I will. Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted just to share a story, but someone's sharing their screen at the moment. There we go, it's gone. We're talking about positive racial socialization. And, as I was learning about this in Dr. Joy's book, I was thinking, oh, I wish I had that. I wish I had. And then I read an article on a story that my mom had bought me. And I used to love this story. And it was called The Black Rose. And it was a story of a memory of Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah's his visit to the West in 1912. He visited Canada and America on a tour. And he was going to the Bowery Mission, which was a homeless shelter, and going to spend some time there with those that were residing there. And on the way there, they had met a group of boys. And these boys, Abdu'l-Baha was from Iran originally, but lived at that time in Israel. And he was wearing the long Eastern garbs, and they clearly had never seen this type of dress. And they were remarking about it, and his entourage, part of the entourage, his host went over to them and let them know who he was and what he was going to do and why he was there. And she invited them back to her home the following day, which was a Sunday. She didn't think they would come, but they turned up, and they were like in their Sunday best. And they were just like, almost like street urchins, sorry. And they turned up in their like Sunday best and, all ready and stuff. And so there was a large group of white boys that went in first. And then hanging behind was this Black boy. And Abdu'l-Baha saw his face, like he was almost not wanting to go in, not knowing if the invitation extended to him as well. Because this was a white woman's home, and essentially you weren't allowed in these spaces. And he'd never really had interaction probably with someone of her stature. And anyway, Abdu'l-Baha saw him and welcomed him in warmly and held his face and remarked how beautiful he was and called him Black Rose. And this is described by another Baha'i, Howard Colby Eyes, in his book, Portals to Freedom. And if you read the section where he speaks about just the love in Abdu'l-Baha's face and how this simple act captivated everybody in the room, the adults, but mostly also the other boys who looked at him as looking at him like, wow, look at him. We didn't see this before. You know, and it was this wonderful elevation of this child. And Howard Colby Ives speaks about this child was just enraptured. He had probably never had anybody single him out before in that way, shape, or form, you know, among all the other white boys that were there. And, you know, as my friends sometimes try to speak about, well, what's the significance of Black Lives Matter and don't all lives matter? I said, that's for me, the epitome of Black Lives Matter. It's not that the other boys are not invited and they're not in the room, because they're already in the room. But you have to welcome the others into the room, those on the fringes, you know, and let them know that they're welcome in the room and that they belong in the room and that they're valuable enough to be there. So I think about that story and why it was well worn. Not that I understood it at the time, but there was something that I was gleaning from reading that story. Didn't quite understand it back then, but it was definitely something that lifted my spirits. And so, friends,
we do have three more questions from an individual. Are you ready for that, Una?
Yes, I am.
All right, this is from Patricia, who says, thank you for sharing this presentation with us today. It was very mind-opening. And then your questions. How does one deal with racism and colorism when being of mixed race?
My husband is mixed race. And he calls himself part of the invisible minority because he represents as a white body. And it's only when you speak to him and you learn about his story and he shares it with you, and he shares it with everyone openly, that you realize that he is in fact Black and of mixed heritage. And my boys have that experience and he has that experience. But one of the things I know that he recognized, particularly when we came here, I've never lived in North America before, and I've only been here a couple of years. And this is the first time our family has lived here, even though my husband is Canadian, he's never really lived here outside of school. And as we were going about setting up our life here, I remember him having an experience with car insurance. And he was just amazed at how smoothly it went. And he came back and he said to me, Una, you know, if you were with me, it wouldn't have been so smooth. And he said, I traded on my whiteness to be able to get the advantages that I did. And I knew I was doing it. You know, and I think it was upsetting to him to realize that it would have been different had we both gone together. But he has different experiences than I have. But what he does do is he extends that privilege that he receives to all of us, and we are included. There are some things he can shield us from, and there's some things he cannot, and some things he cannot shield his boys from. And that is heartbreaking because their experience is their own, because they show up as darker than he. It is, I think, this is an area that we are still striving to understand and appreciate, there are those mixed race people that present, you know, as Black, and those that don't. But it's only an issue because we have this issue of color and being closer to the mothership, if you want to call it that. You know, if we take away those barriers, if we don't engage with the standards that society sets around race, and I think that we can do that. But one of the other things I've also come, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is as much as there are barriers out in society, there are also barriers that I constructed of my own that prevented me from interacting in the manner and showing up as I should. So I constructed them on the basis of what I thought I knew or understood, or the lies that I was hearing about myself, and sort of made my sphere of operation smaller. And I think the process of this course and other things has helped me deconstruct this prison, because the game can only trap you if you play it. What if you have the courage not to play it and call it out for the illusion that it is? Because race is essentially an illusion. It's a myth, it's something that is man-made, but it's our engagement in it that makes it real. And if we don't engage with it, then it can't have the power over us. And if more of us disengage with it, then it diminishes in its effect. That is just my thinking.
Thank you. The second part of the question, I think you addressed already here, which is, how do you find the balance of embracing both sides of your heritage, both Black and white? So if you feel you have more to add to that, go ahead. But I'm going to ask the third part of the question. Do you want me to wait?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Is it okay to categorize biracial children as only Black? Or how do you handle going out in the world and being told, I'm only of one race?
I think that's how we socialize our children. And how we've brought up our children is their grandmother is white, and to not acknowledge that heritage was to deny her. And that was not something they would do because they loved her. She's passed on since, but yes. I think we have to claim it both. My husband claims both sides proudly.
Thank you. That is it for questions so far.
I don't know if anybody had any other comments. I had, I was thinking I told my story already. Yeah. The only other thing I think I was gonna speak a little bit more about was in terms of just the power of prayers, and which restores hope for me. And you know, that is just my own personal source of strength. And everybody, I think, needs to find their own. But I find a lot of solace in, we have a series of revealed prayers in the Baha'i faith, and prayers that address every possible feeling I find. You can always find something to make you feel better. And that is one of the things that I really hang my hat on, and allows me to move through, I think, what we're now calling microaggressions. Like when I go out in Stratford, there were always little things that happen, you know, and these little incidents that are racist incidents, but you have to pick your battles. But they're innocuous things like, you're standing beside, somebody who may be white. You both are next in line and they would call the white person and not see you. Or, people would, before COVID, not drop the change in your hand, but just drop it sort of, just down on the ground, like they didn't want, sorry, on the surface, like they didn't want to sort of touch you or something. And I know that, some of the students from Nancy Campbell, as they went out and did outreach and stuff, encountered, some real nasty elements in society. And we know where the white supremacists are here in our city, because they're not quiet about it. But we can live here together. It's big enough for all of us. And I think even when you encounter these things, it's the power of prayer that gets me through anyway. And there's a lovely poem that I'll share with you that Ruth Foreman had written. And she's also she's also presenting it. So I'll just share it with you. And I know a number of you may know it already. Oops, sorry. I did that wrong. Let me do that again. Sorry. It's just short. This is how I look at prayer. I think she epitomizes it well in this poem.
Pull them on quiet.
Sorry.
Each morning.
Let me just go back to the beginning, sorry.
I wear prayers like shoes. Pull them on quiet each morning. Take me through the uncertain day. Don't know what might knock me off course. Sit up in bed. Pull on the right, then the left. Before shower, before teeth. They were my mama's gift to walk me through this life. She wore strong ones, the kind steady your ankles. I know 'cause when her man left, her children gone, her eldest son without goodbye, they the only ones keep her standing. I saw her still standing. Mama passed on some things to me. My smile, sense of discipline, my subtle behinds. But best she passed on, girl, you go to God and get you some good shoes, 'cause this life ain't steady ground. Now I don't wear hers. You take them with you, you know. But I suspect they made by the same company. Pull them on each morning, first the right, then the left. Best piece of dress I got.
And there are indeed my mother's gifts that she gave to me, and she showed me what faith looks like. I'm happy to say she is also very proud of her natural hair, and she told me, teaches me how to be proud of mine. So yes, and that was my positive racial socialization. So
at this point, we should probably all unmute and applaud. I'm not really sure, yeah?
Yay, Una!
Lawapa.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Una.
Bravo.
Good job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it.
So nice to see you. And spend
Wonderful,
time.
so
fast.
I'm leaving.
Well, I hope that there will be a way for us to share this recording with friends who were unable to be here today. Because I did send out the invitation to a number of people, but I can't tell if they're on the list or not because it's so long. So I'd love to share it with the people who weren't able to get here tonight.
And I think that, the fact that we had so many people, and thank you everyone for your attention and your support, is that we need to go and have these conversations. We need to go forward and share this information, because I have a friend that says, we are capable of doing extraordinary things. What will our extraordinary thing be? We get to decide.
Hi, Una. I know that Mr. Gordon Naylor, the principal of the Nancy Campbell Academy, is here. I just wanted to know if he had any thoughts as an educator of Baha'i-inspired institution and principal, anything to share with us this evening.
No, he's not there.
Are you here?
There anymore. Oh, I see you now. Hi, you're now.
What? Much love from Flint, Michigan. This was so good. Thank you so much. Really, really. What a service. Yeah, thank you so much, hon.
You're welcome.
Ditto, ditto. You would need to do this far more often, Una. It's so enriching to everyone. It's so loving. A wonderful speaker. I miss you.
Oh, I see one of my friends, Bill, from Grand Manan Island in New Brunswick. Very small community out there. Good to see you, Bill. Okay.
Friends, I think our time together has come to a close.
Wow.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Una. Thank you
Thank you. I think it was very, very nice for us to have you tonight. And thank you so much for the amazing presentation and eye-opening for us. And I'm sure that it would initiate a lot of discussion and conversations among friends. And from CABS, I wanted to thank you for putting the time aside and coming out tonight. And thank you for everyone for participating. We are hoping to get the recording uploaded somewhere. If we are successful, we are going to send an email to all the participants who have registered, and you can also share it with friends. Una, thank you so much again for all your help tonight.
Thank you very much, Argus. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Lawapa.
Lawapa.
Thank you, Una.
She showed up and showed out.
Thank you, Una. That was great.
Lovely.
It was lovely. Nice to see so many faces. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Nice to hear you, Miss Una's mom.
Bye, Baba.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've got a lot of good work to keep on doing, so stay
More
safe.
than a talk. Thank you.
Remember to wear your masks.
Everybody.
And remember to share this beautiful night with everyone you meet.
Okay.
Andrea Gordon, it's too late now, but Gordon is there.
Yeah.
Was there, yeah.
Is he still here? I think he's gone, no?
I saw it.
He came back. I just saw him just now, literally, like I
He
think.
was there and then he was gone.
He has left.
Okay.
But Miss Cindy Wong is here. Miss, are you still at Nancy Campbell?
Oh, yes.
Did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share with us?
And yeah, it was lovely. Thank you. So, and I think Miss Flanagan is here too, so maybe she can.
Yeah, she signed off as well. We didn't ask her or Mr. Naylor in advance, so.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. See you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Take care. Okay, take care.
Bye, Linda. Bye.
Baba.
Say it again.
Keep moving around on the screen.
For leaving.
Baba says hi.
Thank you, Barbara, for your support. That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Call me in anytime.
Thank you.
It was amazing to be present, and it's just what a blessing. So I agree with everyone and everything that's been said in the chat. I can't wait to hear your feedback of that, Una. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm just going to save it now because otherwise I
It does save down to the administrators. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I got it. I got it.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Alboris.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
In the morning, Una.
Indeed, my dear. So I'm just making sure I've got the chat. I think I do.
We'll also save it, I think. So.
Thank you. Just in case I haven't. See you. Nice to meet you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Janet.
I've got my 9 o'clock prayers on. I'm late.
Okay, I'll miss it tonight, Janet. See you.